We have Michelle Van Tilburg, Ed Nussbaum. We have Jeffrey Sass and myself, Colin C. Campbell. We are the Serial Entrepreneur Secrets Revealed. And if you're listening to this in podcast, you may not know this, but this is actually a live show on Clubhouse every Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern. So if you're listening to us and you want to join us on stage, you want to come over into our show, we'd be welcome to have you. Every week we meet at 2 o'clock Eastern on Friday, and we talk about the code, what it is that we do as entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs to crack the code, to figure out what entrepreneurs do to start, scale, exit, repeat. And I have an announcement to make as well. Very excited about this. Last year, we signed a publishing deal with Forbes for the book Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. And yesterday, we got the date of October 3rd, 2023. The book is going to hit the shelves, and that is called Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. I do want to emphasize that we have a lot of authors, experts, serial entrepreneurs come on the show. And for you to really find out about those authors, you should go to www.startup.club and sign up to that email list. Every week, we send only one email per week, and we usually announce the top speakers of the week on Startup Club. 900,000 members strong. We're growing to 1 million. We'll hit 1 million members in no time, and we would love to have you join the club. Today, we have Joe Foster, founder of Reebok and author of the book Shoemaker. He's going to join us in about 2 or 3 minutes. Just before he joins us, Jeff or Michelle or Ed or Mimi, any thoughts on today's show?
Well, I'm just going to say this is just a phenomenal opportunity to hear Joe, who just actually joined the stage, talk about what it really took. And my gosh, this man is crazy brilliant, creative, as well as persistent. So I don't know, Colin or Jeff or Ed, anywhere else that you could come on a stage and be able to get access and ask questions to someone that has done what Joe has done. So I'm looking really forward to this, and I'm so glad that we're able to bring this to the members.
Absolutely, Michelle. And it's also an opportunity to get behind the scenes of a truly iconic brand. There's really only a handful or maybe two handfuls of brands in the world, global brands that you would call iconic, and certainly Reebok is up there as one of them. So it's very exciting to hear from Joe today.
So if you're in the audience or you're on stage and you think this is going to be an interesting episode, and I do believe it is, second, if you look at the very bottom of your screen, the second icon is a share screen. We have 6 people have shared already. I'm going to share it on Clubhouse right now as I'm speaking. I just saw that. This is episode 85. That's pretty cool. Let's kick it off. Joe, I think you're calling in from the UK. Our first question is, how did you start Reebok? I mean, who starts what it was? You didn't call it back then a unicorn, but who starts a multi-billion-dollar branded company? It's a phenomenal story, and we just want to hear about how you started. So, Joe, you got the microphone on the bottom left there. Give you a second to catch your breath. And Michael Gilmore is on stage with us as well, who does the show every Friday, The Complete Entrepreneur. And his show is, there we go, Joe.
You can hear me now.
We can hear you, my friend.
Okay.
I think this is the third time we get a chance to interview you. The other time was about 3 months ago, and it was in Fort Lauderdale, and it was live, and that was really cool. We have 1 hour today, so let's just jump into it. How did you start Reebok?
Indeed. Well, good evening, guys. Yes. How did we start Reebok? Jeff and myself, we were young, naive, whatever it is. But our parent company, we worked for a parent company, but it was really, really fading, going down. And we thought we needed to do something. And at the same time, we actually had to do national service, which is like conscription. we're just sort of still following on from World War II. So for 2 years, Jeff and I had to leave the company and go do national service. And that was a good
Jeff
thing
is your
for us.
brother, right, Joe? To be clear.
Jeff is my older brother, yes, and he was my partner when we started Reebok. And going to a national service gave us that bit of confidence that you're not at home anymore. Mother's not doing this, and Dad's not doing that, and all of a sudden you got to look after yourself. So looking after yourself, you learn a few things like I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and it gives you some discipline. So when we came back from national service, still seeing that the parent company were not. Not, in fact, the biggest problem was my father and uncle, who now ran the factory. The business was started by my grandfather way back in 1895, but they were now running the company and they didn't speak to each other. They were at war. Like Addy Dassler and Rudy Dassler, they just didn't get on at all. So the company was going down as a result of this. So Jeff and I decided, well, they won't change. We couldn't get them to change. We've got to do something. So we left the company in November 1958 to set up our own small company. We called it Mercury. And of course, unfortunately, there's a story there. It's in the book, but we couldn't use the name Mercury. After 18 months, we had to change our name, and we changed it to Reebok. But that's how Jeff and I started our company. We left the parent company, and we started Reebok.
Well, it's very, very, very cool. And Michelle, I remember we were talking about this interview today, and you were thinking about, what would be the next question. And it's really about, you started this business, and in reading the book, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm trying to shorten it a little bit here. But
Okay.
basically, you spent 20 years to get to 9 million in revenue. And then you decided, you know what, we have to expand into the United States. Can you talk a little bit about that decision?
Yeah, well, the decision was that when we left parent company, the one big sport that we should have been in was soccer. Football, they call it football in the in Europe and the UK, but it's soccer that you know it in America. However, although my grandfather had been really tops in soccer, by the time Jeff and I left, Adidas had come into the UK, and it would have cost a lot of money for us to compete in soccer. So we were athletics. We were running, and we got to we got to a point where we were as big as we could. We were number one in the running fraternity. We were big, but compared to soccer, we were small, very tiny. But I knew in the USA that athletics. That was a big thing in athletics. You've got 380 million people. You've got colleges. Every college and every university had coach, and you could actually go to college on a certificate on a sports just doing sports scholarship. Yeah, so you could do that. Whereas in the UK, I think we had one college. So for me, it was like if we're going to expand our business, we've got to get on the big stage, and the big stage was America. And this was in 1968, and I'm talking to our new family, who now knew as Reebok. We changed our name from Mercury, and we're Reebok. And I'm saying, look, guys, we've got to get to America. And they're saying, that's too expensive. That's just a long trip, and who's going to pay for the airfares and the hotels and whatever? Fortunately, the British government advertised and they wanted us to export, and they would pay, in fact, for the stand at the NSGA show in Chicago, and they would pay the airfare return, and they would also pay half of our expenditure while we're there. From that point, no problem with the family. You can go. So 1968, my first trip to America, in Chicago in February, which you're in Fort Lauderdale. That's always warm. Chicago, February, it's so cold. However, that was the start. But it took me until 1979. That's 11 years. 11 years going to Chicago. We did get a break, and it went to Houston for a couple of of years. But 1979, I met Paul Fireman. But that wasn't the reason that we got into America. The reason was that running became a big category in America. You got 350 million people in America, and probably 10% by 1975 were actually running. They were competing, they were doing 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, and enjoying it. And it was really a fitness regime that everybody loved. So, fortunately for us, running became something big. And by 1979, we'll say the magazine Runner's World. Runner's World, that really helped the running to expand and to grow. And Nike grew very big on that. But we're across the pond. We're not, it's a little bit difficult. And every time I talk to Americans at the NSGA show is, when will you get a distributor? But it was 1979 when we got Paul Fireman. And the reason for that is because Runner's World had given us 5 stars. We got 5 stars for 3 shoes. Aztec, which was our trainer, which would be the bulk. And then we got Inca, which was a spike shoe, spike track shoe. That also got 5 stars. And Midas, that was a racing shoe, a road racing shoe. So we got 3 5 stars. That got us into America, and that's where we got to the 9 million.
Oh my gosh. So you're just working away. Your family's been working at this business for years. You and your brother pop in. I think if I understood you, at least 11 years afterwards, where you finally start to see, oh my gosh, maybe there is a really big opportunity here. So you get over here to the US, you make this amazing, you make it into this amazing rating. By the way, that is still the de facto rating for shoes, so that you are a pioneer, Joe. What
Right.
from there? Like, so you're here and you're finally here and you're making some movement. What was the big factors? What like really helped you catch that big break that put Reebok over the edge?
Well, to be honest with you, it was women.
Yes, of
Women.
course.
We have to think it was women. We were the first sports footwear brand that looked at women, and because we found aerobics. It was Arnold Martinez down in Los Angeles. He, his wife Frankie, was going to these aerobic classes, coming back, and with her friends, they were so thrilled with it, brilliant. And Arnold said, "What are you doing?" Because Arnold was a tech rep for Reebok, and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "We're doing aerobics." And he said, "Okay, what's aerobics?" Well, she said, "We're actually exercising to music, and we love it." So that was the beginning. Arnold went to see the next class. He saw that the instructor was wearing a pair of sneakers. We think they were New Balance, but she was wearing a pair of sneakers. Half the class wearing the same sneaker, the other half wearing no shoes at all. Arnold's light bulb moment was, why don't we make a shoe specifically for aerobics, but specifically for women, on a woman's last, with a nice glove leather upper and a cushion sole. And he went up to see Paul Fireman in Boston, who was sort of running the operation. And Paul said, "Just a minute, Arnold, slow down, slow down. We're a running company. We're doing it very nicely. Why do we want to be making shoes for girls dancing?" Oh. Arnold didn't like the response he got, so he went round to the back door, had a word with Steve Liggett. Steve Liggett was in charge of production, and he managed to get 200 pairs of samples of what he wanted, the shoe he wanted, from Steve. Took them down to Los Angeles and gave them out to the instructors and some of the leading girls down there, and they loved them. They actually loved them. We had a few problems with the leather because it was too thin, but we got that right. And then Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda bought a pair of Reeboks and started to use them in her videos, in her exercise videos. And that was it. All of a sudden, it took off. From a $9 million company, we went to a $900 million company in 4 4.5 years. So that was the growth, and it was all about women.
Oh my gosh. I mean, think about that. You spent 20 years to get to 9 million, and then you catch your big break. And I know Jeffrey Sass calls this the twerking moment. Jane Fonda wears the shoes. Well, first of all, you offered something different in the market. And I think that
Yeah,
was key. You offered something that no other shoe manufacturer was doing, which was women's aerobic shoes. And then you caught the big break because Jane Fonda wore the shoe. Did you pay her money for that? How did that
no,
happen?
no, she had to buy them, which
Because
which was
you
which
know
was
now they
amazing.
pay hundreds of millions of dollars for endorsements from different sports celebrities. You see the
I
way
know.
that sports celebrities have really come in, and you didn't pay a cent, and yet that big break caught. That's absolutely insane.
Right. I guess what I was just saying, because up till then, I mean, the money was being paid by people like Adidas and Nike for performance, but performance was really what we know as men's sports, be it soccer, American football, or basketball, baseball. They were the stars, and they were the ones getting money. Nobody knew anything about aerobics. Uh, and, this is what we call white space. Even when we were a small company, we looked for the space because Adidas was there, Puma was there, Nike was still in the background, but we had to look for the space where they were not, working, and we could make out of it. And the biggest white space that we found was aerobics. So, I mean, today, it wasn't a matter of, we used to call it how do you grow your business. Now it's pivoting and it's scaling. So we pivoted into aerobics, and we scaled at an incredible pace. And that in itself brought a lot of problems. But we got there, and we overtook Nike, we overtook Adidas, and we became number one sports brand in the mid 80s.
What's
May I?
funny, you say the we're going to open up in a few minutes. We'll go around, Ron, so just hold off there. We're going to come to you. But what's old again is new again. Uh, Jane Fonda was one of the first influencers.
Yeah.
And you talk about terminology, how they call it scaling up. The reality is a lot of these lessons that we're getting today, we all think that that it's just now coming out that we should have influencers, or we should build a community, or be different with our product design. But yet we're going back 50 years, and it's old again, it's new again. It's fascinating to see. I do have one more question, and then we'll start to go around the room, and starting with Jeff. But um, my last question for you is: we have a lot of startups on this club. We have a lot of startups who listen to this podcast, and
Right.
what is it? A startup to actually, it's fun. My son's down there in the corner, Quinn Campbell. I told him you were coming on, Joe, and he's a big fan of your shoes. So
Fantastic.
yeah, so what do we tell Quinn? What do we tell other startups today? Like, what kind of advice could you give them at the beginning of their journey that you'd have loved to give to yourself? I don't know, 50
Well,
years ago.
yeah, I think what it is whatever you're doing, number one, you have to believe in it. Because not a lot of people will actually believe in what you're doing. They need convincing, but you have to believe in it. And what is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is an optimist. What is an optimist? An optimist is somebody who can see through all the dark clouds, through all the problems, who can see that there is something there. There's something extra, and so that's where the entrepreneur comes in. And a lot of people ask me and say, "Look, can somebody who is not a sort of optimist, can they become you know, an owner of a brand? Can they become an entrepreneur?" And for me, it's difficult. I think you need almost that focus, which is seeing through the fog, seeing through the brickwork. It's seeing something beyond and believing in it. It's taking risk. It's not gambling. It's taking risk, and that risk is believing in yourself. And if you believe in yourself, fantastic. But as much as for whatever you have and whatever brilliance, whatever you've got to enjoy it. You've got to have fun. And that is so important, because if you're not having fun and every day becomes a challenge, then you You can enjoy challenges. You can make the challenges work for you. We did that all the time. We thought, yeah, well, this is a challenge. How can we turn it around? Like we had to change our name, and that became a better name. We had to change our silhouette, and that became a better silhouette. And I think if you want to really be an entrepreneur, you have to believe in your product when other people are slightly pessimistic, slightly, that you've got to be the one, and you've got to show that, so that people sort of pick up on your enthusiasm. People pick up on that energy, and if you can do that, you then bring people in, people who will work with you, because you can't do these things on your own. You need other people. So it is that, it's the energy, it's the belief, and whatever your product is, wherever you're going, you've got to believe in it and work at it. The only thing I will say about that is, if it isn't working, change. This is, again, pivot. So if it isn't working, pivot. And that's, those are the sort of lessons, I think, that anybody starting right now, don't be worried. If you fail on that first or even the second attempt, get up. Failure is a lesson. Failure means, we're doing something wrong. We had to change from Mercury to Reebok. We were doing something wrong, maybe a better name. Reebok became a better name. We had to change our silhouette, and that's because Adidas said that we were, well, we were sort of, I could say, we weren't copying their three stripes, but we were infringing their three stripes, because we had two stripes and a T-bar. And we worried about that when we first got the letter. But 5 minutes after reading that letter, we thought, just a minute, this is an opportunity. Adidas know we're here. We're only a small company, but Adidas are now concerned about what we're doing. So it's looking at the problem and saying, how do we work on those and make it work for us? So, that's the advice I can give to anybody, is that, use your own, be confident, and believe in yourself.
This is such great advice, and coming from a man who actually did it and experienced that. And we really appreciate you sharing that with us. One other thing I noted that you said is really your strong belief in the team right from the beginning, right? You allowed your team to make the company such a big winner. That's so impressive, Joe. So we commend you for that. Um, we want to go ahead and get to the audience. We have a lot of folks up here that are anxious to ask you a question. So let's go in order, and we're going to go to Jeffrey next. Jeffrey, what is your question for Joe?
Thanks. Well, first of all, Joe, thank you so much. This is literally a masterclass. And I wanted to just go back to two things you mentioned, and a question related to them. So you talked about looking for the white space, and I just think that's such an important thing for people to remember. So I wanted to highlight that. Look for those opportunities in those white spaces around the edges, so to speak. And then, when we talked about earlier, Jane Fonda picking up the shoes and using them in her, ridiculously famous aerobics videos back then.
Right.
I mean, she literally is considered one of the creators of the whole home video market because of the success of those tapes of her doing her aerobics. But someone might look at that and say, you got lucky. Isn't it lucky that Jane Fonda chose Reebok shoes for that? But she didn't get lucky. You positioned yourself for that to happen by making that decision to go after women and aerobics, to spot that trend. And my question really is, what gave you the confidence to go after that trend when even people on your team were telling you, why would we target women? What is this aerobics? Why would we do a special shoe just for that? Yet you persisted, and that persistence is what led to Jane Fonda doing it, not luck.
Well, hi, Jeff. I can agree with what you're saying, but you need a certain amount of luck. When we call it luck, I know a lot of people say to me, "There's no such thing as luck. It's just being prepared for when the opportunity arises." But in the first place, we needed to be in sports footwear. In fact, when we talk about luck, there's a guy, I forget his name. It's Pink, I think it is. He's in New York, and he's what? Dan Pink. Stan Pink. That's it. Dan Pink. Oh, Julie knows more than I do. She's great on it. But Dan Pink, and we were talking about luck, and Dan said, "Well, yeah, I do believe in luck," because he said, I feel I'm lucky to have been born in America, in New York. And I think if you bring it down to that basic, if you were born in a good place, you've got more opportunities than somebody who's not born in a good place. So there's a space for luck. And okay, yes, we were willing to pivot, or in my early days, we were willing to change the direction, but we were willing to pivot because as a $9 million company, that's not a big company. But when something comes along and you can see an opportunity, then why not pivot? And I think that's so important in the growth of many companies. It's finding that one thing, and it we both said it. It's white space. It's something there's nobody there. Women just didn't have a sport of their own that was remarkable. Aerobics became that sport. So I do believe in luck, but I also believe in the fact that you've got to be prepared and you've got to be ready. And an entrepreneur has to be ready to pivot, has to be ready to scale when they can do. And it gave us an enormous opportunity. And the thing is, though, and I was talking about this earlier, and that is that enthusiasm that you have rubs off on other people. But people like the idea that we can win. And when you get a winning culture and people are looking and saying, well, we can do this, we can do that, even if it doesn't work, you tried it, you did something, and you learned a lesson. And the lesson was, okay, that one didn't work, but we can do something else. And it is that willingness to, as I say, these days, pivot. That willingness, you've got to have that. That is optimism. That is being an entrepreneur. So, yes, we were very fortunate that at the time we were ready. We had a base to make the product, and along came aerobics. So, yeah, for us that was wonderful, and uh, we were looking for white spaces all the time. And even today, I look for white spaces. And I meet an awful lot of people, and the things that are going on today, you'd be amazed. There's a lot of new things going on, and a lot of people should be looking forward to saying, "Well, what next?" COVID was terrible, but what COVID did is that it brought Zoom out. It brought these Clubhouse. It brought everything out.
Oops, it
Oh, well,
looks
we
like
lost him there.
we dropped.
He'll join back in a minute, and it's just fascinating to hear about these white spaces, Jeff, and how paw.com, we are in Meowington's, Michelle, how we're always inventing new products that don't exist. This whole concept of be different, be unique, find the white space. I think it's pretty cool. Ed, I know you had your mic there. Do you have any thoughts about today's show as we wait for him to come back on, get his power back on, whatever it is?
Thanks. I was just prepared for a follow-up question, but I guess we
Yeah,
have to wait for him to come back for that to happen.
yeah. Well, you know how it is. He's overseas, and he's there. He is. He's back. He's back.
He's
Don't panic,
back.
everyone.
Oh my gosh. So good to see you again, Joe. And we have Ed next. Ed has a question for Joe.
Hey, Joe, welcome back. And it was just a follow-up question where after 20 years of building that solid foundation to be ready to get lucky, you mentioned like once that luck hit, the scale up era of Reebok began. And so I was curious when you talked about some of the challenges, maybe to share a little bit more about what it was like to go through that whirlwind of scaling up. And after the 20 years of building that foundation, were you quite ready, or what were the surprises and how you overcame them? And the reminder, your microphone's in the bottom right of the screen to so we can hear you.
We definitely can see you there,
Yeah,
but we
Joe,
cannot
you're
hear you.
on. Yeah,
All
you're
right,
There he
good.
is. He's
I
back.
think I'm back on again.
you hit the mic.
All right.
Yes,
As
welcome
long
back.
as Julie's there, we love Julie, by the way. Say hi.
Hi, Julie. Julie, wants to say hi?
Hi guys,
Hello.
I'm here as the tech support.
She is technical support, yeah,
We miss you.
and it's obvious we need her. Okay, So can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you. We want to hear about the whirlwind,
Yes.
the scaling whirlwind.
Right. Well, it's. I think that if you are an entrepreneur and if you're looking for the opportunities, when something comes your way, you just take it. You just start to say, "Well, why not?" And you look at everything. Okay, we could have said, "No, no, no. We want to stay pure. We want to stay performance," but you're a company, and you're in. We were in athletics, but we wanted to get into sport. And in fact, the biggest problem with aerobics was that it did challenge us as to whether we were a performance sports company, and we did sort of think, this is specific to women. Will it last? And I think, fortunately for us, it did last because Adidas and Nike just didn't pick up on it. They just thought, no, no, no. This is temporary. This is something which will come and go. But for us, it actually became global. And it took us. It really took us above Adidas and above Nike. So when we became number one, we became number one because we persisted and we sort of worked on this with women. And the biggest problem, because you did mention what is the biggest problem? The biggest problem was that the growth was immense. We were 9 million. In 12 months, we were actually 30 million. And then 12 months beyond that, we were 90 million, then 300 million, then 900 million. And you think, okay, how do you finance that? Well, once it starts rolling, finance wasn't really the problem. We got the answer to finance. What was the problem is how to get the product. Because you're looking at these factories, and these factories, they can't build new factories overnight. Factories can't increase production beyond about 10 or 20%, and we wanted 300%. So we were lucky. And again, we bring in luck. Lucky because Nike, who'd been going like a steam train, they've been really, really growing very fast. They got to the point where they had too much inventory and they had to pull back. They closed about 3 factories just when we needed that production. So call that luck, call it whatever. But these are the problems. That if we hadn't have had that factory space, we would have probably starved the 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 brand, the demand. And if you starve the demand, it goes somewhere else. So we were very fortunate in doing that. But again, we're optimistic. We're optimists, and we look for the that white space, that opportunity. So opportunities came our way, and we took advantage.
It's amazing. And, that belief that you and your team had and that persistence, it's just really outstanding that you persisted again. Like, I think there's probably everybody in the room here has either owned a pair of Reeboks or wanted one. So that says it all. So,
Yes, indeed.
Joe, yes, next on the stage we have Michael Gilmore. Michael is joining us from Melbourne, Australia. He actually hosts a regular show on Thursdays at
All
5
right.
p.m. called The Complete Entrepreneur. Michael, thanks for joining us so early. What is your question for Joe?
Hi, Michael.
Yes, it's great to talk to you, Joe. It really is, and to hear your story is absolutely amazing. So the question I have for you, Joe, is this: is that you and your brother founded the company, and I would imagine, like brothers, you may find yourself wanting to go in one direction. Well, he wanted to go in a different direction. How did you manage that potential conflict between you both when you have a situation when you have two founders?
Well, I think for us, again, it was fairly lucky. I was probably the one that was most outspoken, the one that was most willing to drive things. But Jeff, he was brilliant. Jeff loved the factory. And I can remember Jeff said to me, "Look, Joe, leave the factory to me. I'll run the factory. You do everything else." And and whilst that's a sort of a short statement, really what he did was the fact that okay, Jeff ran the factory. He loved making shoes. I didn't particularly love making shoes. And if you've read my book, you'll find that I didn't like running and I did not like making shoes. So my particular skills were in other places. And so that means that I could do everything. I did a lot of designing, and I designed the Aztec shoe that got us our 5 stars. So I did designing, I did the marketing, I did all the rest. So fortunately for us, as you say, in fact, my father and uncle were a good example of what you're saying. They did not get on together, and that drove the Foster business into, well, drove the motor business. Whereas with Jeff, he just looked after a factory, and I looked after everything else. And of course, when we really got into the big numbers, the factory was only small, and the factory could not cope with that. But unfortunately, as a disaster at that particular moment of time, Jeff, unfortunately, he got cancer and he died. And so the whole thing was upside down, and I had to change a few things. And it was such a shame that he didn't live to see what we achieved. It would have been great, but those early days were really important that I could do. I could get on and do things, and I'm pretty sure I did some stupid things, some really dumb things. But Jeff never, he never criticized. I think he probably recognized that you try something, it doesn't work. That's what happens. You try something else, and so we never had a bad word. So for me, and I guess again that was lucky that we managed to have such a good relationship. But I do agree with you that families can be very difficult, and well, I guess the Adidas family, and in fact, my father and uncle are very good examples of that.
Thank you for your question. Like it's fascinating to hear, um, just the dynamics when you have two founders in a situation like that. And my guess would have been quite a high pressure environment as well. So over to you, Michelle.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. And how close we all become, our founders, our family, when we're building these things. Everyone is so critical. So we appreciate you sharing that story.
Yeah, the funny thing about that, though, I may answer that, is there was a time when we all lived on within the factory building. Jeff and myself, we both married, and we both married a Jean. So all our mail was coming in. Jeff was a JW, I'm a JW, and both our wives were J. So there were all the mail coming in for 4 people. J Foster or JW Foster. So that was really confusing, and particularly when the taxman was looking for who needs to pay this money, and we had a lot of fun actually laughing at that. It became quite amusing.
I bet. I bet that is fun, right? Well, let's get over to Samantha. Samantha, what is your question for Joe?
Hey, Michelle, Colin, and everyone in the Startup Club family. Thank you so much for having me today. Joe, it's such an honor to hear all of your advice. I love the piece that you mentioned about confidence. I think that's super important. The question that I have for you, sir, I did see a few articles regarding how Reebok is entering into the metaverse space with Red Fox Labs and R Fox Games. And I'd love to know your thoughts on footwear transitioning into the Web3 and metaverse space. In other words, what white space do you foresee in the Web3 that might in,
Well,
in other what white space do you foresee in the Web3 and metaverse realms for footwear? My apologies, sir.
no, don't apologize, Matt. It's great. I'm still working out on how we can how we can how we can value this metaverse, and we are involved in some NFTs, and Reebok as an operation, as against me being a founder, it's different. It's now with ABG, which is Authentic Brands Group, and they don't consult me. They don't say how are we going to go into the metaverse. They do whatever they're doing. So It's interesting that I think everybody wants to take some space there because we don't know exactly where it's going. But it's better to sort of take, get a bit of space and let's see what will happen. Yeah, it's a bit like crypto. Crypto, you know, where's it going? It came, really went big, and now it's sort of in its own metaverse. It's like, where are we with this? I think metaverse, it's it's something that's come out of gaming. So many youngsters have got into gaming that now they live in this gaming arena. And metaverse is very similar. It's like, well, where's it going? And to be honest, I really don't know. I wish I did know where it's going. I think it's, if you're under 30 years of age, you probably know a lot more than I do about the metaverse, and you probably believe in it a lot more. Um, but at my age, 87 now, it's time for somebody to tell me, what is happening in this world, because all I can say is I love it. It's entertaining, and if it's the future, great. I'm ready for it.
Joe, always ready for the opportunity. I love it. So let's move over to Quinn. Quinn, this is your chance. What is your question for Joe?
Well, I just had to start off and by you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. Well, I just want to say I'm really happy for this opportunity to be here speaking with you and learning from your experience, as you do have much of it. But with your experiences, I could ask, how did you do this? How did you do that? But instead, I think I want to ask about some of the mistakes you've made along the way in order for me to learn from that.
Well, mistakes. When you make a mistake, I think with any mistake, and I did make a mistake in way back in the early days. I I was approached by a good friend, and they had a very nice company, and they were willing to do the distribution for Reebok in the UK. They would handle that, which I thought was great because that meant that well, I could concentrate on other markets such as America. Um, which was wonderful. But I didn't foresee the fact that the owner would decide to retire, bring his son-in-law in, that his son-in-law would create an awful lot of problems. And my friend who brought me in, he left the company as well and went to Barton, which is doing a different job. So, yeah, I think, was that a mistake? Well, at the time, it didn't seem like a mistake. And I think this is the problem that we have. Mistakes, you know, it's something happens after your decision to change the whatever's going on. And, and I think what you've got to do with mistakes is accept them and change. The thing you have to do with a mistake is to acknowledge it. The worst thing you can do with a mistake is to try and make it work. To try and think, no, it should work. It should, no. Recognize when something goes wrong, and I think that's one of the things that I'm grateful that we at Reebok could recognize that no, that's wrong. And today it's again, it's pivoting. We've got to change, and then be willing to acknowledge it. Even if you do something that fails, which it probably becomes probably a mistake that makes it fail. If it fails, take that as a lesson, and just say, no, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to commit Reebok totally to one distribution. I've got to have a backup on that. I've got to have something better than just that decision. So every mistake is a lesson. And I think, again, being an entrepreneur, being an optimist, you take it as a lesson. You don't take it as defeat.
Thank you so much. I agree with you there on how you view the mistakes and acknowledging them for sure. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Take them head on, right, Joe?
All right. Right.
And move
Absolutely.
forward. I think that could be some of the best advice you ever get, young Quinn. All right. On to Ron. You've been patient. Ron, What is your question? Thank
I
you.
don't get accused of being patient every day. Thank you.
Oh
Hello, Ron.
no.
A great story, Joe. Just so full of learning and provocative hints. I would like to ask, with all the benefit of hindsight, can you think of any strategic moves that you might have made? I'm talking to sort of the companion of Quinn's question, not a problem orientation, but an opportunity orientation. What strategic opportunities might you have taken on that you missed at the time?
Well, I mean, we're talking 2020 hindsight, and
Well, that's okay. We still get a
being
great lesson.
yeah, yeah, being an optimist, I don't believe very much in hindsight. We, we did what we did, and I could have changed a number of things, but we overtook Adidas, we overtook Nike, we became number one. And no matter what decisions I'm thinking, not too sure about that, whatever, we became number one. So, what's to change? And that for me is like, it's almost like regrets. People say, what regrets have you got? Well, there are only two regrets for me. And one is that my brother died and my daughter died. And if I could have changed that, I would have done. Beyond that, every decision I made, I made it. Maybe life could have been different, but had I made those different changes, had I done something, would Reebok have become number one? Would we have had that incredible growth with aerobics? I don't know. It's like, if I wanted to keep owning the company, as against saying, no, I've got to let go to give opportunity to the company. This was not about Joe Foster. This was about the company. And what the decisions I made resulted in the company became a number one. And, so it's hard to have regrets. It's hard to say, what would you change? And because it is almost admitting you've got regrets. So I don't have regrets. I have some thoughts and I wonder, but it's better off left just as wondering about what might have happened than thinking that what did happen was wrong or what I could have changed. I don't think I could have. Well, when you become number one, don't you? Great. So we were so happy to get there, and all I can say is that yeah, I may have thought of things, but I couldn't have. The company couldn't have got bigger. And maybe more people would have known Joe Foster, but this wasn't about Joe Foster. This was about a brand. Our passion was the brand. The brand was Reebok. So everything was about what's best for Reebok. And as I say, we became number one.
And don't live in regret,
Thank you.
right? That's what holds us back. So thank you for sharing your own personal story for us in such a real and emotional way. It's very inspiring. So let's get over to Dean. Dean, what is your question for Joe?
Hi, Dean.
How you doing? I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you to Joe. I worked at Reebok from March of 2019 to December of 2020, where I worked on projects like the Cardi B collaboration and many other things, of course, heritage and legacy stuff like Allen Iverson.
Oh, great.
And upon me leaving out the door, Joe sent me an autographed copy of his book, The Shoemaker, and I just wanted to say thank you again, and thank you for what you created, and which eventually gave me an opportunity to work there, years later. And I just want to say thank you. That was all.
Well, thank you, because that's incredible. I appreciate everybody that's has made anything, put any effort into Reebok, because I value that so much. So many people, our team, so many people, and we talk to them now, and they love Reebok. They love their experience with Reebok. Not everything is great, but really, Reebok has that sort of feeling, that love, that enthusiasm, and when I talk to people, they just value that time.
Definitely, definitely.
It's so amazing, Dean, that you had that experience. I think a lot of us here would be a little envious. So good for you that you worked your way to that. So let's pop over to Jarrett. Jarrett's a regular moderator here on Startup Club. He has contributed amazingly to our members. So, Jarrett, what is your question for Joe?
Hey, what's up, everybody? And if you haven't done so already, make sure you click the greenhouse and follow the Startup Club. Only place that you'll find this kind of quality conversation, in my humble opinion. So make sure to follow Colin, Michelle, and everybody on stage. But Joe, just curious, as you know, hip hop was born in the '80s, and Reebok was, a brand that was mentioned in. Sorry, I got a phone call. And then in the 90s and 2000s, hip hop became
Right.
even more integrated in Reebok. Yeah, what was Reebok's reaction to, hip hop kind of increasing the brand? And then, how did you utilize that in future strategies after maybe you departed?
Well, I think with Reebok, we were not sort of governed by strict performance. We were looking because we'd moved into aerobics. We'd moved out from just we'll say performance sports that we knew. There was something else that was coming along. Everything that was coming along was going to change, and we were ready for change. We were ready to do this. We were ready to pivot. And I think the wonderful thing is that I think that Reebok first started again using um, the stars, film stars, and then music, whatever. So whatever we thought influenced people, we thought we could use this to influence our product. So our product just didn't become something you played soccer with, or basketball, or whatever sport. No, our product was there for the people. People could enjoy our product. They could enjoy it on the street. It will perform. And we are a sports brand, but also we're an exciting brand. We love life, and we're out where life leads us. We're so willing to go with that, and whether it was hip hop in those early days, and I don't know. I mean, we have so many people now that we call influencers, and I think our strategy changed to be how can we influence people? And Reebok became street. I think Reebok at one time during the late 80s, we were supposed to have about 60% of Americans had bought a pair of Reebok, which is an incredible story as far as I'm concerned. And hopefully we'll get back to that now. But yeah, I think you have to look at influence just like we looked at white space. White space is somewhere where we can go to create more influence for the brand. And it could be in people, it could be in different, there will be something different. We were just talking about the metaverse and NFTs. Is this an area for influencing for brands? Maybe it is. Let's go with it. And for me, it's there are no barriers. You go wherever you think that your brand should go, and influencing people and people's lives.
Yeah, that kind of says it all, Joe, right? I mean, you really did a brilliant job, you and your team, of connecting those dots and supporting each other. And that's pretty amazing. So let's get over to Amit. Amit, welcome back to Startup Club.
Thanks,
I
Michelle. Hey, Joe. This is Amit speaking. I'm in Chicago, so shout out. Thanks. It's not too cold yet, but do come by in February.
Well, we were we were there earlier this year, but we and it wasn't quite so cold. When were we there? We were there in April, so it was a bit better than February.
Absolutely. We'll
Still a
leave
bit
the heat
cool.
on for you.
All right.
Regarding the 3.8 billion, was it, acquisition by Adidas in 2005? I'm curious where the control was over that decision, how the decision was made, and then like if you felt like I don't know if like look like you like giving up the company was something, if that was difficult or what it was like afterwards.
Well, I had stepped back from the company in 1990, So I didn't make any of that decision. That decision was made by other people. Um, I think but the problem was that Reebok had plateaued. Now, why is it plateaued and the problems for that? I think it's a question of, the possibly there were too many presidents. We changed an awful lot. We couldn't find the rhythm. I don't think we could find a rhythm at that point. And I had stepped back. I had nothing to do with the brand at that point. It was a decision made by somebody else. For me, unfortunately, because people say to me, "Was it wrong for Adidas to buy the brand?" Well, for Adidas to buy the brand, that was Adidas's decision, and they paid a lot of money. And then people say, well, Adidas didn't do Reebok any good. But I don't think Adidas bought Reebok to do Reebok good, which is a real shame. So really, it's why did the people who sold Reebok decide to sell Reebok to Adidas? And that again eludes me. It was not a good choice for Reebok because Adidas, of course, they were the big boys then. They owned Reebok and they could take Reebok where they wanted to. And I don't blame Reebok. I don't blame Adidas for that because when you pay $3.6 billion for a company, I think you're entitled to do whatever you want with it in a way. A shame for Reebok, and I think it was a shame. And I don't think Adidas knew what to do because Adidas and Reebok almost sort of covered the same areas. Uh, Adidas tried to make Reebok a fitness company, whilst Adidas stayed a performance company. Unfortunately, they didn't do it right. Maybe, and I can only speculate. Maybe Adidas, and I think Adidas now have. I think TaylorMade was Adidas. I think they've now sold off the brands they bought, and I think the reason they sold that is because they're not really set up to be a multi-brand company. Now with ABG, that is different. Authentic Brands, they have over 40 brands, and they're set up to franchise the brands so that each brand can look after itself and run separate. So it's one thing that Adidas didn't have, but I think now with ABG, we have a totally different situation. They bought Reebok now for, I think it's 2.5 billion, which most people said is at least a billion more than you should have paid for it. But their plans are brilliant because they now have over 20 global distribution partners with thousands of outlets. And I think what we're going to see now is Reebok. Well, I think Reebok in Panama, we were there shortly, said now Reebok is unleashed. We think it's Reebok are coming out from the shadows. So what's going to happen is you're going to see much more Reebok. So visibility for Reebok is going to multiply by an incredible amount. By the end of 23, I think that ABG expect Reebok to be back to $5 billion and growing to $10 billion by 2030. So, the Adidas times, not good for Reebok. Adidas did what they wanted to do, and that they grew on the fact that Reebok was so big in America that this gave them a better footage in America. They grew on that. So now that Reebok are away from that, I think Reebok are going to be much better. And for Adidas, you can't blame Adidas for what they did. They did it, but Reebok survived, and Reebok are growing bigger.
That's great news. I didn't realize that. So that's something that we all learned. It's just a lesson, right? When you can try to go with a strategic buyer, especially if you have a company like Joe's, where it really is a legacy of Joe and his family and his team. So that's exciting news. We'll look forward to seeing how they move forward. So
Indeed.
yes, and I'm sure you will be an amazing contributor as you always are. So we have three more people on the stage. We tried to end at exactly 3 o'clock. I think Joe will go about 15 minutes or more so that we can do a proper wrap up. if that's
Okay,
okay with you.
I'm with you. No problem. Carry on.
Okay, excellent. So let's go to Doctor. Doctor, you've been down here patiently waiting. What is your question or comments for Joe? Doctor, you're on mute.
Oh,
Okay,
right.
let's go over to Greg. Greg,
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Thank you,
Hi,
Colin, as
Greg.
well. For how are you doing, Mr. Foster?
I'm doing
I
fine, thank you. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. I do want to say thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your time. I know you could be doing a million other things in the world, so we do thank you for being here in the Startup Club. My question for you is, as I'm listening to you speak, I can tell you you have a competitive spirit because you often mention, taking over as number one, the number one spot to Nike. I got to ask, when that happened, when that, when you guys took that number one spot, what was your language like to your executive teams, your board members? What was your language like um, to them to when you guys took that number one spot?
Well, number one spot at that point, I probably wasn't anything to do with the executive. I was more retired and watching things happen. But the great thing for me was the fact that number one, when we got a 5-star shoe in America, well, we've got 3 5-star shoes, which actually got us into America. That was the time to really feel we've made it, we've done it, fantastic. But you get to the top of one hill, and this question, where's the next one? Where do we go next? We've got to climb again. So we kept climbing, and and it was fantastic to become number one. It was like. We didn't expect this. We just wanted it, but we didn't expect it. It was like achieving something that you think people don't achieve number ones. It's like, how do we do this? But when you've got that enthusiasm and that really sort of that feeling in a company that we can achieve anything, um, when you do actually get there, the feeling is so incredible. So for me, when I was speaking to people, and it was like, wow, you know, this is incredible. This, it's almost a pinnacle, but then you got to say, where's the next one? And how do you beat being number one? Well, I guess the problem is retaining that position to retain number one. And unfortunately for Reebok, it didn't retain number one. But those achievements were incredible. And I think the enthusiasm is making sure that when the team achieve those things, you're all together. You're all actually sharing that goal. And for me, I've said this earlier. It was nothing to do with Joe Foster. It was always to do with Reebok. To get Reebok to become a number one, and don't confuse people by saying no. Joe Foster is this. No, to me it was fabulous. I just wish my brother could have been around at the time to see what we did achieve. And those achievements, it really is. You don't just share this with an executive; you share it with the whole company. And you know, I loved it that people wanted to feel part of Reebok, and for me that I think is so important in any company. People have to feel part of it. They have to feel that they belong. And so for me, it was always that: how do we all belong? How do we all share this achievement? And I still today feel it is such a great honor that we actually achieved that number one position.
and I feel we're all lucky to have you here today on Clubhouse. We're so grateful, Joe. Really, you are a blessing. So, last but not least, we have Jack, who actually introduced us to Joe. Jack, we're looking forward to your question for Joe.
Hi, Jack. How are you doing?
Joe, my brother, it's good to see you here in the Startup Club, and shout out to the Startup Club, shout out to Colin, shout out to Michelle, Jeffrey, Ed, the whole gang here, guys. If you're not following the Startup Club, make sure you do that, and as well, make sure you follow Joe. Follow Joe here on the app as well. Make sure you click over and go to his Instagram, follow him, follow his journey. I mean, one thing that really inspires me so much, actually inspires me about Joe and his story. And but what I would, my question would be to you with, today we have the power of the internet, right? And,
Yes.
back then you didn't have the power of the internet. And so it's like you were, but yet you didn't let that stop you. You didn't let that hold you back. And you mentioned something earlier that really stood out to me. You mentioned no barriers, and I think sometimes we look at maybe our market, we look at where we're at, we look at maybe our geographic location, and we're like, this is where I'm at, this is what I do. And how did you expand your identity than just your environment?
Well, I think for me, and I'm sure for you, Jack, is the fact that if you have a mission, you've got to say where does this end, or does it end? The mission could be anything. It's uh, and I think that's what keeps you driving. The enthusiasm. You say, look, my parental company, J.W. Foster's, they actually did business with Yale University. They were selling 200 pairs of hand sewn running shoes every month to Frank Ryan and Bob G and Jack, who were the head coaches at Yale. And I think that inspired me a little bit in sort of saying, well, if they could do it, I can do it. And then when you start expanding, and we got to USA, I got and for me, Paul Fireman was the gem. He was really good. Uh, I found one of the difficulties is if you put somebody in from another country into a different country and they try and run it, what they don't understand is the culture. So I never wanted to run the American business per se. It was a question of no, the Americans know what to do in that place. Let them run it. Let me give them as much as I can do. Let me give them 5 stars. Let me give them the advantage of what we've known for 100 years, and let them go. And so this is the incredible thing. It is people, and you need a lot of people, and you need them to believe. If they believe, they feel like you. And it's not ownership. For me, it's never been ownership. Ownership is a bit too much ego. Ownership is like, this is mine, this is whatever. No, ownership has got to be between all the people who want to belong to your operation. So, is there any limit? I don't think there's any limit. We're now on a new mission. Our new mission, unfortunately, means selling Joe Foster because we're selling the book Shoemaker. But we get an awful amount of incredible feelings from people who write and say, "Wow, love that book." In fact, we had one today. He read it 4 times, and now he's just actually sent for another signed copy because he wants to keep that for his son, who is only 2 years old. And when he gets old enough, he's going to give it to him. We feel so humble at that. That is incredible. But that he would feel that our book is so influential in his life that he could keep it for his son. So, I think being humble is what I think that's good. I think it's like being in awe of what has happened to Reebok and being in awe of where the future is for anything. And so, we travel, as you know, we travel a lot, and it's great to talk to people. If people have got any confusion, any problems, it's like believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing. And we got that lucky that Reebok became so big that it gives us this opportunity. So nice to talk to you, Jack.
That's awesome, Joe. And I have one more question, Joe. I just wanted to sort of try to summarize. I don't know if you know this, Joe, but Mimi in the audience there, she writes a blog after every show. So Mimi,
Okay.
I think I'm going to be able to help you with this one. But you're listening today to really a legend, Joe Foster, who is the author of the book Shoemaker. I can attest it's a great read. Very flows very quickly. It's a fun read. If you're a startup or you're thinking of launching a business, I just think it's such a great book to read. And your story about the son there, I'd invited Quinn in. I said, Quinn, there's a moment in time when you can come in. He came and he asked a great question about, what were your biggest mistakes? And so I thought it was really cool. Uh, if you've come in late to this show, you can listen to it on replay on Clubhouse or on your favorite podcast network. The name of the podcast is Serial Entrepreneur Secrets Revealed. You can simply just ask Alexa to play it. We post them every Wednesday. So this episode will be posted next Wednesday at noon. So a few lessons that sort of picked up on this in this show here today. Influencers work. What's old again is new again. I think that's absolutely fascinating. Looking for opportunities in the white spaces where nobody's there. Be different. And it's interesting, be different, because I think Reebok lives up to that. Before even knowing you, Joe, I was searching on the internet for a pair of CrossFit shoes, and I came across one created by Reebok, and I've ordered a second pair for my home up north. But I just found it interesting that they really, specialized in that. But be different. Position yourself for the big break. And that does luck does come, but if you're prepared when the opportunity arises, that can actually make a big difference for your startup. What's interesting, Joe, you don't know this, but we have a chapter in the book Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, which I mentioned earlier on in the show, which is publishing October 3rd, 2023. And there's a chapter in the book called Position for the Big Break. And given all our conversations, hopefully we articulated your story pretty well in that chapter.
I hope so.
Yeah, the next is reviews matter. I mean, think about that. 3 Shoes got 5 stars, and that makes a
Right.
difference. I mean, everything today is about reviews, even Airbnbs or whatever it is. Reviews matter. What's old again is new again. Distribution is key, and your patience and tenacity to take over 10 years to get there was a pretty awesome story. Energy and belief. You got to have those 2 things as an entrepreneur. If it isn't working, pivot and change. Trust the team. Don't live in regret. And I'm going to ask you one last thing. And you ended it when you came here in Fort Lauderdale and you talked to the Entrepreneurs Organization. You mentioned 3 words, and they were the same word, 3-letter words. And it was all about what, Joe? If you want, I can remind you of the word, but if you remember the speech, 3-letter
Oh,
words.
I can remember the words indeed. I can remember the speech. I can remember being there in Fort Lauderdale. We loved it.
All right.
We really did love it. But Colin, the thing is that if you're going to be a success, the most important thing is to have fun. And as you said, these 3 words are the same, because the second best thing is having more fun. And thirdly, you got to have fun, whatever you do, really have fun. And those are the 3 most important things. Fun, because if you're not having fun, it's tough. And if you're having fun, it becomes a lot easier because you're enjoying it, and the people around you are enjoying it also. So fun, fun, fun. Those are my 3 words.
That's awesome. It's been a great show. We'll see everybody next Friday, 2:00 Eastern. Can't say how thankful we are to those who came on stage. Michael, Samantha, Quinn, Ron, Dean, Jarrett. You're like the biggest supporter of Startup Club. We love you. Amit, Dr. Yang, Greg, and Jack, of course. We love you too. So what a great show. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye then. Bye.